Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this very special Business Disability Forum webinar. My name is Ruth Fisher. I am the Learning and Development Manager here at BDF, being joined by my colleague Bella Gore, who is the Head of Legal and Content. And I'm also being joined by Robin Christopherson, who is the Head of Digital and Inclusion at AbilityNet. So hopefully everyone can hear us okay. If you are having any difficulty hearing us or seeing anything, please do put a little mention in the chat, and we will try to sort that out for you. So as I mentioned, I was speaking with Bella and Robin today. We have really started thinking about the effects and impacts of COVID-19 on disabled employees. We've had a number of requests and inquiries from our members and partners. So please note that this is about supporting disabled employees, this webinar. We will not be giving any information in general about COVID-19. For that kind of information, we advise that you check the gov.uk website as well as the World Health Organization website. And finally, we know there were lots of people who wanted to join us today and were willing to sign up. Unfortunately, the technology did not permit us to have more than a certain number of people on at the same time. So just for you to know, we will be recording this webinar. We will be uploading it to our website. And if you have any colleagues that would like to, who wanted to join this particular webinar and weren't able to join, they will have access to it thereafter. So please feel free to share that link once we have it. Unfortunately, and we do send our apologies that we weren't able to have this particular webinar captioned. We will have these weekly updates for COVID-19 and how to support your disabled employees, and those future ones will be captioned. We will try to make sure that there are transcripts available thereafter after this particular one. And finally, as just a kind of a final point, we do have a number of people joining us today, and so we may not be able to answer all of your questions. However, we will provide a fact sheet with some frequently asked questions after we've been able to complete the webinar. And hopefully we can answer all of your questions even whilst we are speaking today. So without any further ado, I think I've kind of introduced us a little bit, but I will invite, well, I'll tell you a little bit more about Business Disability Forum for those of you who are not as familiar. So BDF, as we are affectionately called, we are a nonprofit or a membership body, and we have a number of businesses and public sector organizations that have joined us as members and partners. We've been around for over 30 years with having experience in promoting, shaping, and celebrating better business practices and performance of disabled people in the workplace. We have approximately 300 members and partners as part of our membership. And we are also joined by a number of people who are neither members nor partners, but have a keen interest in how to support disabled employees in the workplace. And we provide a number of services. So many of you who will be familiar with some of the resources we have on our website, as well as our member hub, the consultancy services that we provide, our advice, learning and development, of course, as well as many of our events. So just for those of you who may be interested, you can take a look at our website and find out more information about what we can offer. I'll also invite Robin to tell us a little bit more about AbilityNet.
Hi, yes, so I'm Robin Christopherson. I'm Head of Digital Inclusion at AbilityNet. So AbilityNet are a UK tech and disability charity, and that's pan-disability, including temporary impairments, mental health, the full range, dyslexia obviously, and all areas of technology from low to high to very complex. If people have got multiple or profound disabilities, we don't all come in neat packages, and some people are a rich mixture of impairments. And we have been putting a lot of work into how you can transition the assistive technologies or the setup you've got at work into the home environment safely, effectively, and how you can optimize your workspace and your working patterns, etc. So we've been doing a lot of that recently, as people could imagine. I am blind myself, and I've got a feeling this is a Union Jack mug. Could be wrong, but I've got a feeling it is. But Brexit's fallen well and truly off the radar recently. But just to say that I would prefer this to be a European mug, just in case anyone infers anything from the fact that I might be sipping from a Union Jack mug during the presentation.
Thanks for that, Robin. So as we are continuing on with the There we go. Just to let you know what we'll be covering in today's webinar, specific guidance about disabled people and coronavirus. We'll be answering some of the frequently asked questions. We have literally been inundated with a number of questions and queries coming from our members and partners, and so we'll be addressing some of those today. We will also have a segment where we'll ask for your questions, and so if you want to put them in if you can look on the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a Q&A area. So if we have not addressed any of your questions whilst we are conducting the webinar, please feel free to drop your questions in there as we continue, and we will respond to those at that segment. We'll talk about a few tips on working from home, and also look where we can signpost you to more information and support. So, Bella, hey.
Hello.
How you doing? You okay?
Yep, not too bad. Greetings from Edinburgh, where it is not sunny. It's actually raining.
Oh, okay. I won't highlight the fact that we've actually got lots of wonderful sunshine here in London. So as we were talking about earlier, we've had a lot of emails and inquiries coming from various employers, just kind of asking what employers should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing, is particularly with regard to disabled employees. So can you kind of clarify on what some of the guidance has been about staying at home?
Yeah, so the government has said that the official guidance is that everybody should stay at home, ideally as much as possible. However, it was initially a little bit ambiguous. There were 4 categories of people, of 4 areas where you can go out to get exercise once a day, to buy necessities like food or medicine. But the last one was, it said that people could travel to work where they absolutely could not do their job from home. And people who are not key workers, so disabled people who are not key workers, it seems, can travel to work if they absolutely cannot do their job from home. That is the official guidance from the government in the UK.
Okay, so specifically, if there's an employer that has a number of disabled employees who are not key workers and who are unable to work from home, are they permitted to ask them, or should they be telling them to come into work?
Okay, so there's no definition of absolutely cannot be done from home. However, that's a very strong statement. So I think it's likely to mean that unless it's an intrinsic function of the job that you have to do it on site, then the person should be allowed to stay at home or work from home. Now, I would urge caution on employers who are insisting that their workers do travel to work. And the reason I say this from a legal standpoint is that employers have a duty of care to their employees to ensure a safe working environment. Now, never has that been a more sort of pertinent point, because obviously there are some working environments that we know are not safe, particularly for key workers at the NHS, but also supermarkets and delivery people as well. They still need to be as safe as possible in the circumstances. So I would say for things like shops and supermarkets, really enforcing that 2-meter rule and keeping customers at 2 meters apart from each other, enforcing that with signage and with staff telling people to do that. And perhaps putting up panels, additional panels, glass panels, distancing, not requiring signatures, which a lot of people are already doing in delivery situations. But if your workers are not key workers, think very carefully about whether they need to travel to work, because, and I'm going to use legal language here, it is reasonably foreseeable that traveling to work on crowded tubes, on trains, and being with other people is a risk of catching the coronavirus and getting COVID-19, which is the term for the actual disease. And if people do get seriously ill and there are long-lasting effects of COVID-19 on them, there is a risk of a personal injury claim down the line on there. Also, be wary of saying that only disabled people who need assistive technology absolutely cannot do their job from home and need to come into the workplace. that is a risky line to take. If you're allowing other people who do the same job to do their job from home, but you're insisting that disabled people come into work, that too might lead you down the line to disability discrimination claims.
Okay. Actually, I was going to ask you about that. What about employees who need adjustments, but they don't have the ability to have those adjustments at home, and kind of what they can be doing at this point as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, this is a difficult one because a lot of employers are struggling with this. It's all happened very fast, and people do need to stay at home. Now, when it comes to assistive technology, that's been where we've had most of the questions from employers and employees about working from home. There are organisations like our friends at AbilityNet and Robin who can help with assistive technology and getting it into the workplace. There's a couple of things to note. Where there are licenses for assistive technology, they normally go with the computer, not the user. So that means that if somebody is working from home using their own computer at home, or they've been given a laptop by their employer, it is likely not to have the assistive technology on there. You will need another license. We have spoken to license providers, and I see Robin waving as well. And a lot of them have said, talk to us, and they're willing to be flexible on that. So Robin, did you want to say something on that?
Well, just that in our experience, almost all of the, trying to think of an exception, assistive technologies, yes, they're absolutely tied to the device, but you can remove that license, and most of them are a cloud-based authorization process, and that key then becomes available for for moving onto another machine, basically. So you can sort of manually move it from one machine to another. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think it's also worth flagging that more and more common these days is that the built-in customizations, the accessibility and personalization features within devices are sophisticated enough to be the full solution for someone who previously would need some specialist software. So in that case, it's really important that the employee, who may or may not have been present or kind of involved in the customizing of their work machine, if that isn't available and they need that set up at home, then they'll need some support from people who are familiar with those accessibility settings to recreate that at home. We've got a really good online resource called mycomputermyway.com. If you go there, then you can slice and dice the information. They're step-by-step guides of all the accessibility settings, and that can be done by OS, so Mac, Windows, iOS and Android, or by impairment category, or you can just search for the thing that you're after, like magnification or whatever it might be. So okay. mycomputermyway.com, we would encourage disabled people who are suddenly presented with a new device that they need to try and customize for their needs, or indeed for everyone, because I would argue that everyone would benefit from making, not sticking with the vanilla experience, because we're all different.
Okay, thank you so much, Robin, for that. Yeah, that absolutely. And our partners and friends at AbilityNet and also Posture People, who are Posture Right, they've got lots of good advice as well on ergonomics and being safe and comfortable in the workplace, and that is really important. Lots of people are working from kitchen tables and armchairs and all sorts of things, so there's a lot of tips out there on the internet on what to do and how to be safe. There's things like using ironing boards for safe for standing desks. I just urge a little bit of caution on that, is that is your ironing board stable enough to keep your computer, host your monitor, and is it all going to fall over? So there is and I would say to employers specifically is check in with people who are working from home and make sure that the environment they're working in is safe, and if it's not safe, as in comfortable, ergonomic, that they're not going to injure themselves and cause back problems, then the employer still has a legal responsibility to make sure people are working safely. I know this is a difficult time, but do check in with your employees. Now, some other questions that we've been having. Giving people laptops is great if they can see a laptop screen, which is small. Some people with visual impairments, they will need a larger monitor, and some employers that we know are actually sending the computer the person's using at work to their home environment, along with chairs and other equipment. They're just couriering it to home. Others are giving people a sum of money to purchase equipment. Now, admittedly, these are richer, larger employers, but it might be something for some of our members to consider. But be aware of where you're buying. Give them advice as well on where to buy equipment, because you might want to go to very well-known internet delivery services that are still delivering, but they might not always be the best place to buy ergonomic assistive technology. So before spending the money, give some advice on that. And as I said, conduct assessments, home assessments on how people are working, and check in and see whether that's working for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Bella. We have had a number of questions as well around how employers can make adjustments for employees who might never have worked from home before. And one of the things that came to light when I was speaking to one of our colleagues is that Ofcom have a particular advice on their website about how to ensure, number one, for example, your broadband service is at its optimum speeds, your mobile services are at its optimum speeds, how to test the speed, how to test devices, and also what devices may interfere with broadband speeds and with phone lines and that sort of thing, which may also interfere with the use of the software if it's being used. So those are a couple of things that to note. Do you have any other light to shed on some advice for employers who maybe need to give some advice there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of other things. So a lot of people are homeschooling, their children are at home now. So and if you're living in a household where lots of people are using the internet all at the same time, this can cause a real problem for people. So when you're kind of doing a webinar like this, for example, so timetabling, if you can, I know that's difficult with children, but allowing employees to have some flexibility around when they do their work. A lot of people are trying to stick to the same routine. So, they're logging on at 9 and they're going off at 1 for lunch, and they're sort of logging off again at 5, which is great. However, it's not working for some people at the moment. So if it's the case that perhaps people who are caring for others need to start early in the day and then sort of stop working while children are being homeschooled and then log on again after they've gone to bed, allow this flexibility. Some people who've been home working for a long time know that this is one of the advantages of doing that, but you do need to give advice that you're not supposed to be on 24/7. You have to set some boundaries, and we'll come back to that a little bit later on keeping healthy. But flexibility doesn't mean being on 24/7 either.
Absolutely. Robin, it looked like you had something that you wanted to add there.
Well, I'd be happy to put a link into the chat or to send to you guys to send around if people are interested. But yeah, we've put together a sort of a 101 or a getting started top tips for employers and employees who are new to the environment of home working, because there are lots of tips that have come out already, and I'm sure more will come out later on around setting up making a non-ideal workstation as good as you can, mixing it up. Bella mentioned a ironing board, and we would definitely recommend putting that up against a wall if you can, to avoid a laptop catastrophe, and moving from one unperfect workstation to another for variety from an ergonomic point of view. That's a very sound suggestion for employers, because you're not going to be necessarily able to recreate the perfect workstation. So to mix it up is really, really important. All of those breaks. With a laptop, you are looking at a screen that is not an arm's length away if you're using the keyboard on the laptop. So from a focal length point of view, it's much closer than the standard monitor setup. So you do want to look away from the screen as often as you can to take your focal length to infinity. And I'm sure later on we're going to talk about things like trying to reduce distractions, trying to keep mental health as positive as possible by avoiding social media, rolling news in the background, that sort of thing. So there's lots of top tips that we're going to talk about. And we've covered all of those, plus the kind of disability angle in this document that I'd be happy to share later on.
Great, thanks for that, Robin. So We also had some questions around some of the government advice, things around basically the government has said they could, the chancellor said something about furlough leave and furlough measures last week. Can you explain a little bit more about what that might mean, Bella, in the context of disabled employees?
Sure. So this word furlough, which colleagues in America will be familiar with, but is suddenly come to the fore here in the UK as well. What the Chancellor has said is that you employers who would otherwise have to lay off employees completely because they cannot do their job at all. And of course, remember that lots of businesses now have closed completely. So hairdressers, non-food shops, gyms, a lot of places are completely closed, although some of those people, of course, are self-employed. But if they are employees and the employer would otherwise have to be laying them off, they can put them on furlough leave instead, which would mean keeping them on the payroll and paying them 80% of their salary up to a cap of £2,500 per month. And that's all because of the coronavirus, if that's why they're being laid off. And the employer needs to submit information to HMRC about the employees who've been furloughed. And there's more details on how to do that on the HMRC website. But when it comes to disabled employees specifically, I would urge caution again on only putting disabled employees on furlough leave, because they would only be getting 80% of their salary. Now, this is just a little example. I don't know if it's likely to happen or not. But for example, Ruth, if you and I did the same job, but you could do yours at home with no assistive technology and no adjustments. But I did need assistive technology and adjustments. So our employer said that, Ruth, you can carry on doing your job and you'll get 100% of your salary, but I would only get 80% of my salary and I'm on furlough leave. That would be a detriment. That would be unfavourable treatment arising out of my disability, which an employer might have to justify later in a disability discrimination claim. So it's probably not going to be as clear cut as that, but that's just by way of an example. Just be careful that isn't what's happening in the sort of swiftness to deal with these situations.
Great, thanks, Bella. I know that we have only a few more minutes left, but can you tell us more about what the government means with regards to vulnerable groups? Because I know that they were talking about, people who may be vulnerable at this point. Does that actually mean that an employer has to send all disabled employees home, even if they're key workers?
No, so not all disabled people are vulnerable, as defined by the government, and the word vulnerable is a government advice term at the moment. And not all of those people who are on the list as categorised as being vulnerable will self-identify as disabled. It's important to note that. Now, the full list is on the government website. It's on our website as well, but it's primarily people who have had, for example, organ failure or a transplant, or are immune suppressed because they're receiving chemotherapy or other drugs that suppress their immune system. And it does include people who are over 70, regardless of their medical condition, but these aren't people in the most vulnerable category. So that's people who've received a letter from the government. But all of that is in the government website. So disabled people who aren't in the most vulnerable group, if they are key workers, can still go into work.
Great, thank you for that. As we are running out of time, do you think we should take a couple of questions now? Would that be all right, Bella?
Okay, we're running until 12:30, aren't we? 3. So maybe we've got time.
Yes. My goodness, you know what? I keep seeing, I keep seeing the timing, and I keep thinking that we're running out of time. So you're absolutely right. We got more time. So if we're going to, there's a couple of more questions that have come across my desk. If employees do not want to travel into work, for example, for fear that they might catch coronavirus, and they might be afraid of infecting other people, for example, who they might live with, that may have a disability or health condition, what sort of recourse can they take?
Yeah, so okay, this is a difficult one. So if you're not disabled and the employee is not disabled themselves, but they live with somebody who either is disabled or is more susceptible perhaps to catching the coronavirus and getting severe symptoms of COVID-19, that's quite a difficult situation. So if they live with somebody who has symptoms, then the individual shouldn't come into work for 14 days. If they have symptoms themselves, then they need to stay at home for another 7 days. But if nobody has any symptoms at all, and the employee themselves isn't disabled, then they are covered by the Equality Act. They are protected as somebody associated with a disabled person, the person that they may be living with. So they mustn't be directly discriminated against or harassed because of their association with a disabled person, and that could mean dismissing them, for example, if they need to stay at home because somebody at home has got symptoms. But they aren't entitled to reasonable adjustments. People associated with a disabled person are not entitled to reasonable adjustments under the Equality Act. And that means that they don't have the option legally to ask for the reasonable adjustment of working from home or staying at home. That's the law. That's not the best practice. And I think most employers would look sympathetically on an employee in this situation. And it's certainly best practice to do that.
Okay, so Bella, I know that when someone can have a claim, for example, if they are looking after someone else that may have a disability or impairment, and if they are discriminated against as a result, then they may have an opportunity to make a claim for discrimination. Does that apply in this instance?
Sorry, could you repeat that, Ruth? I was just
Sorry, so I know that when someone has, for example, if they are associated with someone with a disability or impairment, and if they are discriminated against as a result of that, then they may have a claim to make about or discrimination based on disability. I'm wondering, does that apply in this instance?
Well, it would if, for example, that they were to lose their job because they had to stay at home.
Okay.
Because of somebody at home having symptoms, but they're not entitled to reasonable adjustments.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So just kind of thinking about this immediate situation, how would you advise employers to think about the aftermath, or if you will, the kind of the effects of on disabled employees later on in the year, for example, or even into next year? I'm thinking more so about issues around sickness absence, performance management, possibly even redundancy, as we mentioned just now.
Sure. So one thing to think about is disabled employees who might be on sickness absence procedures. So they are at risk of triggering further sickness absence procedures if they exceed a certain number of days off sick. So that's quite a common situation where disabled employees have been told that they can have a greater number of days off sick than people without their disability, but if they do exceed that, or they get to that trigger point, there will be attendance management procedures. I would strongly urge employers to consider disregarding any COVID-19 absences when it comes to coming to that trigger point in this situation. That's for somewhere down the line. I'd also think when it comes to performance management, people might be less productive while they're waiting for their adjustments, or their adjustments don't work as well at home. And if that is the case, to take that into account when it comes to performance management or even bonuses down the line, although I suspect a lot of employers won't be paying discretionary bonuses this year, but it's things just to factor into when people are saying, well, are they eligible, and how are they being upgraded in performance management?
Great, thank you. And I think actually you and I were having a conversation before about taking your annual leave and that sort of thing, and some advice for employers as well.
Yeah, people should be encouraged to take their annual leave as well. I mean, there is a temptation to say, well, I can't go on holiday to Barbados now that I planned, if you were lucky enough to have planned that. So I'll just carry on working. It's advisable to ask employees to take their leave, and often if you don't take your leave, you lose it anyway. And different employers have different leave situations. Some have fixed years, January to December. Some have from when the date you started. So just keep an eye on when people need to take leave, and make sure that that does happen. Employers can ask people to take leave if they can't work. And it may be that they came to a point, of course, of being furloughed as well. Employers might want to consider sabbaticals. If people have always wanted to write that book, that novel that they've had in them, that might be an option. And for some people who absolutely can't do their job, but could do other work, there is, of course, the National Help Service, there is volunteering that is needed as well. And it might be part of corporate social responsibility, perhaps, for employees who are able to do that, to help in other situations.
Great, thanks for that, Bella. Robin, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Just a tiny data point on the topic of requesting your employees to take leave. So AbilityNet, we've been instructed to take at least half of our leave by the end of August. I think most organisations or most employees tend to backload their leave towards the end of the year because they haven't taken it off, and they use it or lose it kind of thing. So that sort of a measure, even though yes, we can't go abroad or anything, or to the seaside or indeed anywhere, to encourage your employees, or to mandate that your employees take a certain percentage within the first 6 months or something, would, I think, encourage that to be the case. And as things are ramping up, as hopefully things get back to normal in the second half of the year, people aren't all going to go away on holiday like they usually do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in terms of managing the mental health and well-being of employees, definitely allowing them to take a bit of a break. I know that many of us have been inundated with both personal emails, messages, etc., about what's happening currently, and then also at work as well. And so just being able to stop and not have to deal with work emails coming through, not have to deal with social media coming through, it might be a nice chance for people to just really take a break from everything, even though they can't physically take a break in the sense of leaving home, but at least being able to kind of come down a little bit. So yeah, I agree with that. And in that same vein, Bella, can you talk a little bit more about what employers need to do to support physical and mental health for disabled employees who might be working at home again for the first time, or someone who's a long-term home worker? You've been a long-term home worker yourself, so what sort of challenges have you faced, or what sort of advice might you be able to offer?
Sure. So I've been working from home since 2008, and all of a sudden it's everywhere. Every newspaper, all over social media, there's lots of tips on how to work from home. So just a little bit, and we do invite you to start asking questions yourselves now, actually, if you want to, on the Q&A. But just before we go to your questions, just give you a bit of personal experience. So before 2008, I went to Tanzania on sabbatical, and I was completely isolated there. There was no internet, there was no running water, there was no electricity, and I learnt quite a lot about being in complete isolation, which is that you do need people, and you do need, that was the thing that I found the hardest. However, when you're working from home here, where you have the internet, and we're very, very fortunate in living in this age with the technology, is that you can almost have the opposite problem, and that you're constantly inundated with information 24/7. So a few things. First, on physical health, move. It is ever so easy to sit down at the beginning of the day, log on, and then before you know it, you haven't moved at all. So I recommend scheduling, putting it in your calendar, just to say move or activity break, and getting a reminder to make sure that you do actually move. My team, we've been scheduling activity breaks and sharing what we've done, like dancing, we know which song we danced to on the radio, and various stair challenges, or just whatever it is. You can dance in your chair if you need to. The other thing is, there's a lot of stuff out there about how to do things right. Working from home, get up, wear your normal work clothes, sit in a particular place, take your break at lunchtime. I've mentioned this already. Actually, it can make some people feel really anxious. They think that they're doing it wrong, they're doing working from home wrong. So what I would say to people, you're not doing it wrong. Find what works for you. don't worry too much about. Read the advice by all means, but don't take it as gospel. You're not doing things wrong. Things work differently for different people, in terms of how you work from home, when you work from home. But do turn off notifications if you can. You can have 2 or 3 phones and your computer all giving you notifications from social media, WhatsApp, Signal, Facebook, and as well as your work WhatsApps and Slack and Teams and everything else, and it can get too much. And easier said than done, try to turn off rolling news notifications. There's a lot of bad news out there at the moment, and you can make yourself quite anxious and depressed, regardless of disability, if you keep listening to that. So try and check in at the beginning of the day, the middle of the day, the end of the day, but if possible, turn it off. And stay hydrated. Some tips are to use actually the water bottle that you would in the office with the water cooler. Keep that by you so that you keep drinking. It's a really simple point, but it's kind of important to keep hydrated, keep eating healthily. Don't work straight through. I'm guilty of that. I've done that this week. It's been so busy. I've worked straight through lunch. I've not gone out. It's a bad idea. I don't feel good when I do that. So really a little bit, there's this word self-care that comes in, and people can feel they can feel guilty if they stop working. And if you're not commuting, people think, well, I have to sort of log on 2 hours before because that's when I would have started the commute, and then I have to log off 2 hours later because that's when I would have ended the commute, and my employer will think I'm slacking if I go for a walk and take your one piece of exercise a day. No, you do need to look after yourself. You really do. And don't overwork. Set boundaries. For some people, setting boundaries is a problem. And the manager may need to help them do that, and give them permission to say, look, this is when you can stop. And for other people, the break from the usual routine can be a problem as well. So some people with some disabilities may find the lack of the usual routine really hard. And again, I would urge managers to sit down and talk to them and establish a new routine for working from home that is safe and healthy. So that's something that is just a few tips that come to mind. And as Robin said, there's lots of advice out there, and AbilityNet has that too.
And as you say, there is lots of advice out there. One of the things that I found, I've been working from home for a while now, but one of the things that I used to find is that I would feel guilty in my downtime because my workspace also has become my home space. And so when I'm in the home space, my brain is not thinking that I'm in home space. It's thinking I should be in work mode. So then finally thinking, oh, I should be doing this, or I should be getting up and to do that. And it's kind of distancing yourself from that, as you say, prescribed way of schedule of working, and actually giving yourself some parameters and that self-care. So thanks very much for that. Robin, did you say that you had something to add to that as well?
Robin, you're on mute.
There.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Phew, sorry. Well, just to reiterate, all of those points that Bella made are really, really good. One about isolation. So when you're working from home, all of that sort of banter in the office, or just asking people ad hoc questions, etc., or just hearing other people's voices is gone potentially. So don't rely totally on text-based communication, email, IMs through Teams or whatever it might be, because a lot of the nuance and a lot of the productivity and efficiency will be lost as well. So schedule regular team meetings, even though you might not have an agenda. Some smaller teams actually leave a group team meeting open the whole time so that they can recreate that atmosphere. I'm not sort of recommending that in all situations by any means. In our team, which is about 8 or 9 within AbilityNet, the particular team I work for, we schedule a 3 o'clock, which is clashing with this one, but that's fine, tea and chat session for just 1/4 of an hour. And there are rules. You're not allowed to talk about work, and you're not allowed to talk about the coronavirus. You can talk about anything else. You have to have a cup of tea or hot beverage of your choice and a biscuit or whatever. But that, I think, is a good way of touching base with your teams. So yeah, have audio calls, have video calls. That can really help with isolation as well. And as Bella was saying, avoid social media and things like that. The temptation to work past office hours is is there, and to lose track of time. But the other way, the other kind of side of the coin, is that all of the things that you might often do outside of work hours, Facebook, social media and things like that can easily intrude. So take your phone, put it in another room. Ideally, if somebody calls you, you can still go and get it before it stops ringing. But isolate yourself or distance yourself from that constant barrage of things that could easily encroach if you're in a kind of an isolated environment where you're just by yourself, and it's so easy to kind of have the distinctions blurring. The one other thing I'd say is that I've got actually playing on this Echo, so I've got an Alexa in the room here, and this is a particular skill called Office Sounds, which I'm just turning the volume up on now. I don't know if you can hear this, but it's like I'm in an office now. There's also one called Cafe Sounds. I think there's a printer going on at the moment. People might start chatting in a sec. And I'll turn that down, and that just goes on loop. And again, I'm not suggesting that that's something that everybody would want. Phones ringing. I'll just turn that down. That's not something that everybody would want to do, but there are certainly lots of ways that smart speakers, etc., can play relaxing music, can obviously do video and audio calls. You can send messages to people, etc. So utilize things that you might not necessarily be able to use in your office as well.
And I mean, absolutely, we have a daily meeting that we've instigated since everybody's been working from home. It's at 10:30. Whether we have quite a small team, but up to 30 people can join in that meeting just to check in and say how they're doing and giving an update on how they're doing, and that's really useful as well. And I've seen actually, Ruth, that there's a question come in from Jackie saying any advice on claustrophobia from when working from home, and that's a really interesting question. Now it depends, I don't know where in the world you are, Jackie, but here in the UK you can still go out for once a day for exercise, a walk, a cycle ride, or a run. I'd really urge people to do that, to go out. If you're not allowed to go out, depending on where you are in your country, really you need to open a window if you possibly can, go out onto a balcony, make sure you do get some fresh air if you're feeling claustrophobic. And moving actually really helps with claustrophobia, actually, just getting up and moving around wherever you are. So, but it can be a real issue. And sometimes actually listening to the sounds that Robin's talking about, if you do play sea sounds or birds, and it's not the same as being outside by any means, but it can help. But that's one of the things around claustrophobia. Hello, Ruth.
I'm here.
Hi. Did you get all of that?
No, I didn't. Unfortunately, the wonders of the live webinar and the time that we're in, I lost connection for a second. I'm back now, though.
Yeah, so I was just sort of responding. I think the people did get that as to sort of how to combat claustrophobia, but we can put some more of that on questions. So are there any other questions, do you think, that are coming in? I can see that there's a few. Yeah, so there's a question here. What risks might there be for employers who have taken the decision not to courier any equipment to employees' homes? Yeah, so it will depend on why, and because offices have closed and there's no access to items, that would be something that would be taken into account. But if an employee cannot work safely without that equipment, then the employee should not be asked to be working, asked to work at all. If that means that employees furloughed, for employers who are large enough, I would strongly recommend topping up the 80% salary by paying the additional 20% yourself until perhaps you can open up the office to get that equipment to the person's home. And remember what I said about people can go into the workspace traveling if they absolutely cannot do their job from home. So if you have got somebody whose job it is to do the couriering to home, that could be somebody who absolutely does have to go into the office to do that if it is safe for them to do so. what might we need to consider around virtual work from home options when things return to business as usual? Now, that one I think requires a crystal ball. There's been a lot of talk about how in the future it's proven that work from home can happen. There's been a big debate. I don't know about in your organisations, but as to whether or not people ought to be allowed to work from home, whether it's possible to do your job from home or not. I was listening to somebody speaking from the ILO who's written a book about this, and he was saying that there are the main reasons why managers often don't like people working from home is that lack of trust that work is being done, that people are actually working, and also a lack of control, not knowing what somebody's actually doing, or thinking that they don't know what people's actually doing when they're in their own workspace. Now, both of those things are countered, of course, by you don't really know what somebody's doing when they're in the office, and just because they're sitting in a chair in the office doesn't mean that they're actually being more productive or working. And the trust issue, judging people on output rather than how they're doing their job or where they're doing their job from. What are they actually delivering? Are they meeting their objectives? Are they being productive? And measuring productivity in a different way, measuring it through targets delivered rather than presenteeism, if you like, being in the office. That's something I think that will be coming into the forefront, and that might be a positive outcome out of all of this. Another thing, as I said, no crystal ball, but I do wonder if some employers are going to wonder if they need so many premises after all. After buildings are expensive, rent is expensive on buildings, and it might be that some employers after this decide that many of their employees can just work from home permanently and that they will close buildings. So I think that might be an issue. And the flip side will be that employees are saying, look, I worked from home really successfully. It's actually been a trial during this coronavirus outbreak. Please let me carry on doing that because I've proven it to you. So I think there's going to be some interesting outcomes coming out of that. Another question is, should we offer to pay for extra broadband allowance for employees rather than encourage evening working because the children and the spouse might need internet access? A lot of broadband providers have actually removed caps at the moment from so if you do have a cap and it's not unlimited, they've actually removed that. But yes, if they haven't removed that, you could offer to pay for the extra broadband. It might still not be enough. I wasn't suggesting encouraging evening working because of the internet necessarily being down, but because you might need to homeschool for children, or have caring responsibilities, perhaps shop for somebody who is vulnerable during the working day. So it wasn't necessarily just because of the internet problems, but yes, that could be something that certainly would be good practice if your internet broadband provider hasn't removed the cap. What else do we factor in for reasonable adjustments relating to neurodivergent employees and people with mental health and anxiety and stress? That's a big question.
It is. Can I jump in there, Nabella?
Yeah, absolutely.
We have, for those of you who are familiar, we have our professional development courses, and normally we have them as face-to-face sessions. We host them at Accenture. However, we will be hosting them as webinars coming up. So if you do want to sign on to those, I'm sorry, I know that you're probably wanting to have an answer right away, but we will have some more in-depth information for you. Some of our resources, we built a toolkit that we'll be sharing with you. So we have a neurodiversity webinar coming, and we also have our mental health and well-being webinar coming up as well. So hopefully that means that we can provide some support in that sense, and a bit more in-depth information than we will have actually time for right now, if that's okay.
But I can answer a couple of things on that. So one, there is a mental health toolkit as well, but remind employees of your EAP service. That's probably always was, that's your employee assistance programs, if you've got them. And that would have always been remote probably anyway. And there may well be counselling available through the EAP. So that's one thing. Regular check-ins from managers with employees, and having that sensitive conversation. So we're putting together a COVID-19 toolkit that's going to go live in the next couple of days. And I did write a little piece for that last night, which is spotting the signs that somebody might be unwell, and that might be physically unwell or mentally unwell. Now, it's much harder to do when they're remote because you can't see them in the office, but there are signs to look out for, that somebody who might be getting irritable, who's crying, might be being more angry, or is being unresponsive. You can't get hold of them when they're working from home, and they haven't got it's persistent. It's not just a one-off that you can't get hold of them. All of these things are things to look for to see if somebody is actually really struggling, and then schedule time to talk to them, preferably face to face. If it has to be on the phone, it has to be on the phone, but to have that conversation to say, how are you, and be prepared for that answer. I'm fine. How are you coping? Fine. Okay, well, I'm concerned that you're not fine, and this is why, and give them concrete examples. I tried to get hold of you. I thought you might be crying the other day. You seem very angry. You seem very anxious. Can we talk about that? Do you want to talk? And you might get some resistance to that because people think they're letting the side down, that they shouldn't be anxious, they shouldn't be upset. But to carry on with that conversation, and spot those signs, and then sort of say, what can we do to help? And it might be just some help with either technology and assistive technology, how to use it, some training on that, or it could be setting some boundaries and saying, giving permission, you can do this, it's all right not to do that, it's all right to take some time out if you need to. So there are things that we've got there, and that can apply. It'll be different for different employees, whether that's anxiety and neurodivergent might mean people are either struggling because they're getting very distracted, or they're struggling because they can't get rid of, because they need more routine and to work that through. I think, Robin, you were waving your hand.
Yep. So just to agree really with that, and to reiterate that, those daily regular team sessions with the audio and video even is a really good way to kind of to pick up on the nuances of people that are beginning to feel the effects of working from home, whether it's isolation, whether it's stress, whether it's lack of routine. So people with neurodiversity in particular relish the routine of the workplace. So if you can be really clear in your comms to those individuals or to the organization as a whole about, the top tips, the toolkit that Bella was talking about, we've got resources on our website as well, and to touch base with them, line manager to team member, to make sure that they're doing okay there. They really, really need to know what's expected of them. That can really help if you're clear in ways that, you can have flexibility when working from home, extra flexibility compared to the office in many ways, but also that you're not just throwing them into this kind of unknown territory where they don't really know. They know they've got to deliver work, but they haven't got the milestones that they have at work. Very quickly, there's a online cloud profiling solution called Clear Talents, and it's free for every employee in the UK to use. And if you go there, if you've already got a profile, then we would recommend that you update it because you're newly, your circumstances have changed now, you're working from home. Or if you've never been there, just go there to create a profile, and it will, as you go through it, it will explore all of these areas. And it's not just disability, it's all the protected characteristics, plus mental health, many, many more. And it's been updated this week for all of the kind of COVID-19 ramifications, and that will give you loads of self-help information at the end, including workstation setup. And it will also pass on to your line manager lots of recommended adjustments that are all reasonable, signed off by DWF, who are a law firm. Depending on what you've disclosed, those are very specific disclosures that you make, and so those reasonable adjustments are very specific as well. I'll put the URL in the chat.
Okay.
Great, thank you for that, Robin.
Thank you. I know we haven't got much time left, Ruth, but there's been a question about self-employed people. We are going to have to wait until what the Chancellor says later today on that. But yeah, we're very conscious that that's a big issue for quite a lot of people who are contractors and therefore are technically self-employed. So yeah, very well aware that that's a big issue for some people in this space. So have we got any other questions that I have missed on this? Just checking. Yeah, I think that we might be almost at time. Was there anything you wanted to add, Ruth?
Not at this point, other than to say thank you so much to Robin for joining us today. And thank you to everyone who joined us today in general. And thank you so much to Robin and to you, Bella. And just to reiterate that we will have a number of resources available on the website, and that we will be continuing to do this particular COVID-19 series weekly. And to join us next Thursday, I believe. And if you check our website, we will update the information there. We also have a toolkit available, a COVID-19 specific toolkit available on our website. So keep watching it for that.
Not yet. It's going to be available very soon because I've just written
Yes,
it.
very soon. Not just yet, but very soon. But this webinar in particular will be available on the website once we're able to upload. And we will also have the captioning available.
Okay. And thank you, Ruth, and thank you, Robin. And if anybody does have any other questions, and BDF members and partners, please do call the advice service or email the advice service at advice@businessdisabilityforum.org.uk. And Emily and Liam and Angela would be very happy to talk to you about any individual issues you have.
Yes, and I will leave the details for the advice service on the screen here. And again, you can check our website, businessdisabilityforum.org.uk, and again, the email address and phone number are there. Okay, I think that's it for today. So thanks again very much, everyone, and we hope you all stay very safe and well. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.